I have a vision for how to make a great American whiskey, but a great American whiskey needs a great American story. And this is a great American story. This is the kind of hero that actually most Americans want to be and imagine themselves. Not somebody that's out there taking advantage of people for their own personal gain, but somebody mastering something and giving the benefits of that mastery so people can give themselves success.
Hey everyone, it's Arick Wierson. Thanks for joining me. Another episode of Leverage Storytelling presented by Tunheim. Today I have the very unique and admirable Phil Steger in the studio from Brother Justus. Thanks for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure, Arick. It's good to see you.
Haven't seen you in a while.
I know, it's been a couple of years.
Yeah.
We were chatting quite a bit.
I hear you've been doing a lot of drinking since then.
You know, I like to call myself a amateur thinker and professional drinker. That's kind of how I do my things. But yeah, you know, but to be a professional drinker doesn't mean you actually do a lot of ingesting. It just means you're doing a lot of tasting, a lot of spitting.
Yeah. So obviously we're here to talk about Brother Justus. Why don't you just give us the quick background on what we're talking about today?
Yeah, Brother Justus is an all Minnesota American single malt whiskey. By all Minnesota, I mean every single ingredient that we use in our whiskey is sourced from Minnesota. Our water is from the headwaters of the Mississippi. Our malted barley is from Shakopee. Our barrels are from Avon, Minnesota, grown in Todd County, and we even have a product that uses peat, and all of that peat is sourced from Aiken County. And really, Brother Justus is my is really my vision, a vision that I had about 20 years ago almost, that says I think Minnesota can make the greatest American whiskey.
You know, obviously this podcast is all about storytelling, and I don't know, someone much smarter and much more poetic than me once said that whiskey is liquid storytelling.
Oh, I think that's right.
I think there's a great backstory that maybe I'd like you to briefly share with the audience about Brother Justus.
Yeah, Brother Justus is a real person. So he's not made up lore. He's not some sort of marketing gimmick or creation. Brother Justus was originally named William Treadle. And he would have just been like a lot of monks that sort of just live their life, pass on to heaven in obscurity. Nobody ever hears about him. In the 1920s, Minnesota went through the Farm Depression. And of course, the whole country went through Prohibition.
Right.
And farmers all over the country started to make moonshine. Brother Justus got involved. He got involved because he saw that farmers needed to make moonshine to make a living because of the collapse of grain prices. But they also needed a way to do it safely and honorably. And they didn't have the tools and they didn't have the training to be able to make clean, safe, high-quality whiskey. He was the Abbey blacksmith and the Abbey distiller. He could solve that problem for them. So he actually built whiskey stills in the Abbey blacksmith shop and smuggled them out to local farmers' farms and then ran them through Benedictine whiskey-making boot camp and made them promise to always do it the right way and teach what he taught them to their neighbors. And if they could make him that promise, he gave them the still. And that created an incredible legacy in Minnesota. By the mid-1920s, Minnesota was making the most highly coveted moonshine in America. It was called Minnesota 13, and there were 1,200 distilleries, active whiskey distilleries, in basically Stearns County alone. And that was such an influential piece because it was really the only whiskey where if you didn't know the specific distiller, but you knew it came from Minnesota, you could trust it was safe, it was clean, and it was the highest quality.
And then, so how did that name translate into the current iteration, which is what we're in front of us today?
So it really came from my personal connection to the St. John's community. I was a student at St. John's. I actually, in addition to being a student of St. John's, I was a student regent. I got to know the monks very well. I got to know the history of the Abbey really well. And I got to know local people really well. And I started to hear people whisper about these experiences or this history, this secret hidden moonshining history that Minnesota has. There's really only been one book written about it. It was written by Elaine Davis in 2011. And before that, you had to know somebody who knew somebody to have any idea that this was happening. And in fact, if you go around in Minnesota, most people don't even know that this was one of the most important moonshining states in the country. And so it really was meeting old timers who remembered and telling me, you know, back in the 1920s, every farm in this county had a still. And we were making the best whiskey. And Capone tried to send up his goons and get control of it. And there's a Model A Ford at the bottom of that lake. And It's got the driver in there too, because they ran into a teeth full of Germans who didn't appreciate the way they did business. Like, you start to hear that oral history, and that stuck with me over the years. And I thought, oh, what a great way. I have a vision for how to make a great American whiskey, but a great American whiskey needs a great American story. And this is a great American story. This is the kind of hero that actually most Americans want to be and imagine themselves. Not somebody that's out there taking advantage of people for their own personal gain, but somebody mastering something and giving the benefits of that mastery so people can give themselves success. That's how I think most Americans see themselves, but that's not who the traditional heroes of whiskey have been in America. So I've kind of tracked this down. I found this book by Elaine Davis. It's called Minnesota 13. Unfortunately, it's out of print. You can find copies, hopefully used copies, maybe online. And I saw this one sentence about Brother Justus building whiskey stills and teaching farmers how to use them so they could make whiskey safely and high quality. And so then I tracked down, his closest living relatives.
Were they able to add a lot of details to the story that weren't in the book?
Yeah, because there was just the one sentence in the book, and Lawrence hadn't had a chance to talk to Elaine Davis when she was writing the book, so none of his lore and none of his living memory of who Brother Justus was, made it into the book, but he told it to me. And we recorded it, and I've been building on that through oral history from other surviving nieces and nephews ever since.
It's really interesting because obviously at the height of Prohibition, here's a monk who was defying sort of federal laws, but he justified it, I would imagine, in the sense that he was helping contribute to the livelihood of these farmers who were 100%. Suffering so many economic pressures, and he felt that was the greater good at that moment.
That's exactly it. And I think that's a very Minnesotan thing. Minnesotans are law-abiding. But sometimes we realize circumstances force you to have to do something to feed your family.
Sometimes the moral and the legal circles are not completely concentric.
That's right. As Brother Justus, or somebody attributed to Brother Justus, something can be illegal but not immoral. And sometimes the legal thing is the immoral thing.
Right.
And it takes discernment to do that, and you should never do it lightly. But when you make a decision, your neighbor's needs trump some sort of abstract, any sort of abstract political agenda or ideology. Terrific. And that's a very Minnesota thing.
Let's talk about the company.
Yeah.
Tell me, so you were kind of going there, you were talking about the research into the family lore and talking to his nephew and so on, but how did that manifest itself and transform into the actual company that is today?
The first thing that I had to do is there's a very huge ambition, right? And pretty audacious ambition. It was like, no, here in Minnesota, I'm going to form a completely new foundation, a new future for American whiskey that tastes better than what they've been doing in Kentucky for 150 years. That's pretty arrogant, pretty ambitious, pretty audacious. I think it's all true, but I also had to have the humility to understand that I was not going to get it right the first time or the 10th time or the 100th time. Maybe by the 1,000th time I would start to lock this in. So we can't begin this business until we have 10,000 hours into making this one thing. We're going to work with one type of grain, malted barley, pale ale malt. Now, we're not even going to mess around with different kind of malts. We're going to use one type of oak, Minnesota-grown white oak. No barrel finishes with sherry or port or anything like that. These are all variables that distract from mastering the most important things, which is how do you make a beer because whiskey is distilled beer, it's literally beer, right? How do you make a beer that has all the flavors and textures of deliciousness in it? And then how do you run your still so you're only catching out of that distillate the most delicious
So you had
things.
about 6-7 years of just pure R&D.
Pure R&D. And then only when we could figure out, not only when we had a prototype, the prototype comes relatively early, then it has to be replicable. Can it replicate through scale? So kind of like a tech entrepreneur would, I've got this code that works for 100 users. I'm not going to make money off of 100 users. I need to figure out how to make this work for 1 million users or 10 million users. And the code breaks when you try to scale it. So the smart entrepreneur figures out where the code's going to break and then builds the patches and the ways that are going to fix that so that they can scale smoothly. We did the same thing in that basement. We got our core recipes, our core prototypes, and then we tested it. Then we tried to scale it up. We changed the type of still we used. We changed the volume of still we used. We found all the ways that recipe would break and then figured out how to solve through those breaks in order to be able to create smooth progression and consistency.
Were you already, though, kind of a master distiller, or you learn as you went?
I learned as I went. And I found other people.
Self-taught?
It's
Or did you
completely
bring in
self-taught.
some?
And then I brought in people who had spent their time learning how to brew. So I never hired a distiller until late. The secret, the fundamental truth of whiskey is that it is beer rain. So its fundamental quality is based on the quality of the beer. And it's not the beer that you would drink. That's not going to work. It's, do you have a beer that has the flavors that you want to drink when they're concentrated in whiskey? That's the whole secret. And nobody else that I could see from my research was making whiskey that way. Not in Scotland, not in Kentucky. And so I understood that there was no one to teach me. There was no one else's template to follow that would lead me to do something truly new that could endure and leave a mark.
Listen, so you brought some booze, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do we got? What do we got here? Let's start with this one.
Yeah, we have our flagship American single malt whiskey, and what that just simply means, this is a simple. It is so. I really believe in the simplest approach. It is one malted barley pale ale. It is water from the upper Mississippi, and it is new charred American white oak barrels grown and coopered here right in Minnesota. This is the whole that I thought when I was going through that tour and when I was exploring whiskey, Irish whiskey, Scotch whiskey, American whiskey. This is it. This is what I thought. This is the jigsaw puzzle that
is this the
completes
flagship,
whiskey.
if you will?
The flagship whiskey. It is the whiskey I created to be drunk every day. If you're an everyday sipper.
What else we got here?
So then we got the cold peated whiskey. This is a truly unique. It's very rare that you can say you actually invented something new that no one has ever done before, especially in 1,000.
What does that mean, cold peated?
So cold peated means we actually filter the whiskey through cold peat rather than burning the peat to smoke the malt before we make the whiskey. So Scotch, when people say, "Oh, that's smoky, that's too strong, that's peated whiskey," that's actually peat smoked whiskey. The only other way that anybody ever has used peat in whiskey is as an agent to burn, to use the smoke to flavor the whiskey.
You're the only whiskey that does this.
Yeah, we invented it. We have patents pending in it in 7 countries around the world.
Wow.
Yeah. So very, very cool.
Have you ever talked to whiskey makers in Ireland and Scotland, see what they think about
We're
that
starting
process?
We're starting to reach out to them. It's very conservative industries, right?
Do they think you're a heretic?
And they're very protective. Some probably do. So others are like, dude, that's really cool and it tastes really good. And I think ultimately for everything that we do, making things taste better from the ingredients themselves, not by adding ingredients, not by adding barrel finishes or anything, but the innate potential of the ingredients themselves. We're bringing out the quality of that, and we're winning people over on taste.
Well, finally, we got this bottle.
Yes.
Glistening bottle here. I know you've got some exciting news to share with us about that bottle.
So these are all, they're on the shelf, all the 365, and then we have the Founders Reserve series. And every year the Founders Reserve is what it says. I, as the founder, reserve barrels out of our warehouse and put together a specific blend just for this year, for each year, based on what I think the most complete, perfect expression of the barrels that we have want to say. And then it's just a blending exercise to make sure that it's perfectly complete and delicious. And I'm very, very excited to say that this year's Founders Reserve was selected by Fred Minnick, who is probably the most influential whiskey taster of American whiskey taster in the world right now. Every year he does a top 100 whiskeys. This is, if there's one bottle of it, he's tasting it and he's including it. It's not just what's on the shelf or what's easily available. The biggest unicorns by Pappy Van Winkle and George T. Stagg and all of these go into the mix. And our Founders Reserve made it to the top 4. The fourth, he called our Founders Reserve the 4th best American whiskey, period, in 2025. He actually said it was his favorite whiskey of 2025 of the entire lineup. But it was so different. He called it a game changer. He said, but it's different from how I've previously ranked and judged whiskeys. And so based on that, there are 3 other juggernauts. It turned out to be an 18-year-old Sazerac rye. It turned out to be 145 proof, a George T. Stagg, like the biggest names in Buffalo Trace's most antique, most rarefied collection were the ones that placed above this. And every other whiskey in America placed below it.
This sets a new bar, right? Because next year you
gotta go better.
It's like getting a Michelin star. You got to. The hardest thing isn't getting it; it's keeping it, right?
That's right. That's right. The whiskey that we made that we got that distinction with was aged between 18 and 36 months, compared to 18 years, 15 years. So we know we have the liquid in our barrels to continue to make the greatest whiskey in America, one of the greatest whiskeys in America and the world.
Right. Well,
and it's only going to get better from here.
Phil, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it, and best of luck to you. And I hope you can place either fourth or higher next year.
Appreciate it, Arick.
for
Thanks so
coming on.
much, man.
For Leverage Storytelling, I'm Arick Wierson. We'll see you next time.